episode number 4 that we'll be tackling today when it comes to understanding and prevention of substance abuse, with special reference to alcohol abuse. And it's all about empowering our employees to have a healthier workplace environment as well. And today, episode 4, I'm going to talk about unmasking the barriers by navigating defense mechanisms in alcohol and substance abuse intervention, and also motivational interviewing. Okay, what does this really mean? Simply, we're going to look at the resistance that the substance abuser is displaying and how you, as a manager, supervisor, line manager, whoever you are, can assist this person in this process of breaking down the resistance to get the person motivated to go for help. So that's what we're going to focus on today, the various types of defense mechanisms that we encounter. And these defense mechanisms we encounter in particular during the stage of moving from pre-contemplation over to contemplation. In my previous episode, episode 3, I spoke about the process of change. And I just quickly would like to recap here, because during pre-contemplation, the person is still unaware that they have an alcohol problem, and during contemplation now there is intervention, there's confrontation, and we make the person aware of the problem that the person has, and then we can move over to the preparation phase, and also finally we move then over to the action phase where the person receives treatment, and after treatment the maintenance phase, the recovering. And if the person is not in the process of recovery, they will relapse again. And today's webinar, I'm going to focus on the skills that we need to advance from pre-contemplation to contemplation to make the person then ready for the preparation phase. And when there's a lot of resistance between the pre-contemplation and the contemplation stage. And what I'm going to do in today's webinar, I'm going to focus on each of these different types of defense mechanisms that people show. And you, as a counselor, line manager, supervisor, whoever you are, must become aware of these defense mechanisms, so that when you see it, that you will know how to encounter it, how to counteract it, and how we can help the person to move towards the stage of preparation onwards towards action. Let's start with the first one, denial. Denial is most probably the most common type of defense mechanism that we get when a person says, I don't have a problem with alcohol, I can stop any time when I want. One patient once said to me, I can stop any time that I want. I've stopped thousands of times before. So, okay, if you don't catch my humor, I've stopped thousands of times means I've relapsed the whole time. And that's the whole issue here. When a person is in denial, they have this kind of a distorted mindset. It's clouded. They don't see reality. Reality is distorted. And when they have this kind of denial mindset, they really, from the bottom of their heart, subconsciously also, they really believe they don't have a problem. And we need to have the right skills how to address it during this stage. And I always say, in this whole series, let's not have an ambush method, because when a person is still in denial, you're going to need to be very sensitive. And that's where your reflective listening skills will come in handy. Like, it sounds like you feel in control of your drinking, sir, ma'am. So you just reflect it back to the person. Why? Because I want the person to get the understanding that I'm really listening to them. And as I am doing that, providing reflective listening, what's going to happen? That person is going to provide information. And I also would like to share back information in a non-judgmental way. And that's what I'm saying here, that to share non-judgmental facts and observations about the impact of their drinking. And this is where we're going to have to make the person aware of our concern, and we show all the facts, share all the facts that we have documented so far. And crucially, during this time, we're going to show and maintain empathy. We need to validate their emotions, and we need to acknowledge their feelings and concerns that they have to build the necessary trust during this stage of denial. Of all the defense mechanisms, I would say denial is the strongest one. It's the stronghold that we need to address. And during this stage, I believe it's so important to build a strong rapport with the person, a relationship of trust, because the more defensive the person gets, the more hostile the person gets, the less I will be able to make an impact and have then the right to influence the person effectively. And that is denial. As they say, denial is not the river in Egypt. It's really helping the person from pre-contemplation to move towards the stage of contemplation. Because those walls of resisting manifested in denial makes it almost impossible. At this stage, really impossible to help the person to get towards the process of gaining insight. Let's look at the next one. That's part of denial is when they minimize their problem. I only drink on weekends. It's not a big deal. I just drink a little bit now and then. But in the meantime, the information that we have received that this person is actually consuming huge amounts of alcohol. And what they are busy doing here, they try to shrink the idea that it's not really such a big deal, and they would like the person who confronts them to convince them that it's not really a big problem. So how are you going to address it when a person minimizes their drinking because they really believe it? Remember, our task here is to bring the person to the point of a reality check. And one way what we use is just a scaling question technique. And what I many times will do, I just take a sheet of paper and from 1 to 10 I draw a line and say, from this scale from 1 to 10, how much does your weekend drinking affect your life? I want you to think about the impact of your drinking on your life, and then we can do the scaling question to help the person to reflect on the impact of their drinking. I think this is the whole idea of intervention, to help the person to gain understanding that when they go for help, it must come from their own motivation. It must be an inner drive. Therefore, we also, in following up with the scaling question, we can also then explore the consequences with them. And these kind of questions that we can ask, like the impact, sir, ma'am, what do you think would be the impact of your continuous drinking? If you're going to carry on like this, what will be the consequences in your life? What's going to happen to your spouse, How will your children respond to it? What's going to happen in your finances, in your health? Let's explore that together. And this is part of the process of making the person aware. Part of this problem of addiction is the lack of self-awareness. Now, by making use of mindfulness tools, we make the person mindfully aware of the consequences of their drinking if they don't bring it to halt. So that's minimizing. Let's look at the next one, is rationalization, making excuses when they justify their drinking. And all people with an addiction problem has their excuses. I drink because my job is so stressful. I drink because I've got stress with my wife, my husband. I drink because I've got pain here in my body and the medication is not working. There's all sorts of excuses that they have. They rationalize their problem. And when we rationalize our problem, we're trying to justify why we are drinking it so that we can carry on. Very important here is that we can learn to reframe it for us. You as a counselor, as a helper, as a manager, your skill that you can use here when a pick up the person is rationalizing is to reframe the whole situation. This means that you rephrase the sentence that the person is using. You rephrase it to put it at a different view, from a different angle. Let me just give you the example here, is that instead of just reflecting when the person says, I drink, my job is so stressful, you can say, sounds like your job is very stressful, sir. I wonder if there might be another way to cope with that stress. You already see that we just twist it a little bit. We turn it around from a different angle when we look at the situation. We can also, apart from reframing, we can also use the skill of exploring alternatives. And here we will just sit together to discuss healthier coping mechanisms and more effective stress management techniques. Because when the person says, for instance, I drink, my job is so stressful, now the person is giving us ammunition, stress. I can see that you're then battling with stress. Let's discuss it, because I'm concerned about your way of how you're dealing with stress, that it might not be the best coping mechanism that you are showing. And let's look at better ways how you can cope with your stress. So this is one of the things that we need to identify, namely when people rationalize or using all sorts of excuses for their drinking. A more aggressive form of defense mechanism is projection, when the substance abuser is actually now resisting it almost in an aggressive way. For instance, when a person is saying, you think I'm the problem, look at how my wife is drinking, goodness, look at that other colleague of mine, he is drinking more, she's really having a problem, why me? Or in the case, what I'm showing here in the slide is my spouse is the one who really has a problem, not me. Where they want to just use that skill, we need to be careful, because it's easy to be sidetracked with them if you're not experienced in this field. And you're going to have to be very careful to redirect your focus. Let's first look at the skill here by having empathy. with the person. So I understand that you are concerned about your spouse drinking. However, let's talk about your drinking now. I'm concerned about your drinking now. We will deal with that maybe at a later stage, but for now, we are concerned about your drinking and how your drinking is busy affecting your life. So what we are doing here is to focus on personal accountability, where we can encourage them to take responsibility for their own actions and behaviors. Part of this denial is where they do not want to take responsibility. They externalize their problem. They try to deflect it away from them, and this is where we would like to bring the focus to the internal locus of control, from the outside to the inside, namely through personal accountability. And that's going to be a gentle process where we just steer them back towards personal accountability and say, listen, we are focusing on your behavior, and I'm concerned about that you are not focusing on yourself now. That's projection. Following projection is blaming, blame shifting. Now the alcoholic is blaming someone else for their drinking. My dad was an alcoholic. My boss, everybody is drinking there, when it's Fridays or when there's a team building, everybody is drinking. And here the person is blaming the culture, they're blaming their circumstances. For instance, if my boss wasn't so hard on me, I wouldn't need to drink at all. The person then makes themselves the victim. And while they think they're the victim, it's the other people that must actually change, not them. And once again, we're going to have to redirect them. But we start with having empathy. Like, well, John, it sounds like your boss is tough, eh? But let's focus on how you can manage your response to that stress without drinking. First of all, we have the empathy, but back to the point of accountability we are directing the person to. Because blaming is a powerful way of a wall that the person builds around themselves so that we can't penetrate it. And that's where we need to make them aware that this is blaming. And that the person would be able then also to, to become aware, to make them conscious that this is actually blaming, that they can label it. Oh, that's blaming. And now we can move on towards problem solving as a beautiful skill, where we collaboratively work together to develop strategies to handle workplace stress without resorting to alcohol. That blaming one, I tell you that sometimes in rehabilitation, in support groups, we find that the person is still blaming the people around them, blaming their background, blaming their childhood trauma, blaming all of these things that people must feel sorry for them, they feel sorry for themselves, and therefore as a justification to carry on with their drinking. So before we can really start with the intense way of therapy that they can do deep soul search, we first need to break the crust of all of these defense mechanisms that we are discussing here today. Intellectualization. Hey, I tell you, what I've seen over the years is that a person with alcohol or substance abuse problem, they can be very clever, and here they will use intelligent arguments to maintain their substance abuse problem. Like, for instance, I've read studies, they say moderate drinking is healthy. And when it comes to cannabis, oh, it's a herb, it's natural, it's good for you, and you can use it in moderation, it's very healthy, there's a lot of health benefits. And with this intellectualization, manipulative tactic that they use, they would like to silence you so that you can back off. And here it's important that you don't fall into that trap to argue with them on this matter, because then it becomes intellectual debate and you're not going to get anywhere. So how are we going to do it? Let's see how you can address it. First of all, by working with balancing the information. Okay, John, while moderate drinking can have some benefits, as you say, let's look at how your current level of drinking is affecting your health and life. So once again, back to the impact of the substance abuse, instead of intellectualizing about it and getting involved in an unhealthy, unnecessary debate. Let's personalize it. Personalization is when we bring the conversation back to their personal experiences and the impact of the alcohol abuse or any other substance abuse on their life. So be aware of intellectualization, that we don't get sidetracked through this manipulation tactic that they sometimes use. Let's look at the next one. Humor. Can you believe that humor can also be a tactic? Like, for instance, when a person is joking. I see it so many times in support groups that you get a clown in the support group and they continuously making jokes around, joking about everybody, and that's also just a way to defend themselves. Like, for instance, when a person would say, well, at least I'm not drinking and driving, I'm joking about it, and all the alcohol related jokes that you get, and many of them we see on social media. Be aware of humor, that you don't get dragged into it, and now you're also on that level of joking, and then you've been manipulated, you've been conned, and now when you are also joking back with them, you're not going to be able to have the necessary impact. But what you need to do, let's just acknowledge the humor of that person. Hey John, I see you are trying to lighten the mood, which can be helpful. But let's also take a serious look at how drinking is affecting you. I acknowledge it, but once again we direct the person towards the impact that the alcohol has on them. That redirecting is a shift towards seriousness. We gently steer the conversation back to the main issues without dismissing the attempt to use them. I think that will help a lot. Avoidance. Avoidance is when they keep on changing the subject or evading questions about their drinking habits. By the way, alcohol and any other substance abuse is actually an avoidance behavior. The behavior is a way of avoiding deep-seated issues, and next week I will talk more about the deep-seated emotional issues that's causing people to drink. But now we also see it as avoidance as part of the defense mechanism. They will use avoidance tactics during the conversation by changing the subject and keeping it light keep it focused on the job or any other related issue, but not focusing on their drinking habits. And you as a helper, you're going to have to stay focused. You are aware of this kind of side-stepping they want to do, because avoidance is a tactic, because it's uncomfortable to talk about these serious things. So of course they're going to want to avoid it. And what you can do, once again, gently, focusing the person to the core by saying, John, I notice we're shifting topics here. Make them aware of the shifting that's busy taking place. Can we return now to discussing your drinking for a moment? So there's a gentle persistence. So we keep bringing the conversation back to the main topic without being confrontational. That's how we're going to help the person towards gaining the necessary insight in their drinking pattern. Regressive behavior. Here we see that the person abusing alcohol, being confronted, they move to a childlike or dependent manner when confronted about their drinking. Let me explain it like this. The regressive behavior is literally when they start behaving like a child, childish. They move into a child situation, and now we see a parent-child dynamic manifesting here. Be careful for this tactic, because this regressive behavior is going to cause you, if you don't become aware of it, become like a parent. Now you want to be the rescuer. When you want to be the parent, like a teacher, it's not going to work, because we want to bring the childlike behavior towards adult to adult communication. We're not going to talk down to them in a condescending way, because then the person may feel you're picking on me, you're talking down to me, and that's not going to work, and then the person will feel not being validated. So your task here, when you pick up this childlike behavior, is to really help the person gently to move towards the adult to adult stance. Like, John, I want to talk to you as an equal partner in finding a solution to this matter together. You're not going to make decisions on behalf of the person. We want to collaborate here. And you need to become aware of this parent-child situation. And this parent thing can be like the supervisor acting almost like a father figure. Like when that happens, you have a child in your team. You have to check on them. You have to parent them. You have to mommy them. And that is not good. It's not going to help at all. And that's where we want to bring it back to equality here, by encouraging responsibility. We're going to encourage them to take full responsibility for their behavior and actions in a very supportive manner, because the child doesn't want to take any accountability. No responsibility from a child, because that's where the parent needs to always look after them. And this is not what we want to see happening here. Be aware of regressive behavior. Following regressive behavior is another tactic that many people are not aware of. Have you ever heard of splitting? Splitting is when viewing people as all good or all bad, like this black and white thinking, such as seeing supportive colleagues as perfect and those who confront them as enemies. Last week I was in a situation when a person was confronted with taking substances during treatment, and the person was about to be disciplined for the behavior. But I had a very close relationship and bond with the person. So what happened? The person did the splitting. Jeff, I will die for you, brother. You've been there for me the whole time. I'll die for you. But you know what? This system here, these other people, these other doctors, I tell you, they are just there out to make my life a living hell. And you've been my friend and my counselor. I trust you with my whole life. And you will never be like them to kick me out, hey? So that's splitting, where there's goodies and baddies. So we're not going to play a good cop, bad cop scenario here. So how are we going to address it? We need to promote integration here. And for instance, when you say it's understandable to have strong feelings about different people here. We are aware of, John, that you have these strong opposing feelings here between these different groups of people, but let's try to see both the positive and the challenging aspects of everyone involved here. We need to bring a balanced perspective into the equation when this splitting scenario is manifesting here. And we're going to encourage a more nuanced view of situations and people. So now that you're aware of splitting, especially for us who work in a rehabilitation center setup, when we need to enforce discipline, we see this splitting, how can I call it, manipulation tactic manifesting, and we are acutely aware of it. When it comes, once again, we show empathy and understanding. However, we're not going to fall for this one. I've seen also with inexperienced young counselors, they built a very strong rapport with the patient, but when it comes to confronting them in a tough way, then they don't do it because of the splitting situation that they find themselves in. Be aware of this powerful manipulation tactic. Displacement is another defense mechanism that we need to become aware of. For instance, a person's taking out their frustration on others rather than addressing their own drinking problem. And here, the focus is once again redirected to something else, and we see it many times at work. The person very submissive towards the boss, just taking everything and come home, and then they kick the dog, take it out on the wife, the children, or the husband. So that's displacement, when we take out our frustrations on others, except for rather addressing the drinking problem. And when displacement is happening, we need to identify the true sources. Like, for instance, John, it sounds like you're really frustrated with that issue in your life. Let's also look at how your drinking might be contributing towards that frustration. So once again, we are redirecting the focus. We want to help them to see the connection between their drinking and the displacement of their emotions. Because many times now the focus is on the dog, on the wife that's not doing what she's supposed to do. And displacement, we really focus our anger on the wrong things here, and when we are not experienced in helping them, we could easily be sidetracked when a person is using this tactic of displacement. And once again, we bring the person back to redirect their focus. reaction formation. What is reaction formation? It's like when we acting overly positive about our drinking habits or insisting to enjoy it despite evidence to the contrary. Reaction formation. There the person will just praise the wonderful time they have about drinking when they're with their buddies and how they enjoy it and how fun it is when they're drinking, spend time there. But here you need to explore the contradictions here. John, it's great that you enjoy the drinking, but I've noticed it sometimes leads to negative consequences. Can we talk about it? I see when you and your friends hanging out, you're all laughing and going on there and have fun. But when they leave, how are you talking to your wife? How are you behaving towards them? And tomorrow morning when you have the hangover, the babbalas, how are you treating them? So that's the contradictions that we want to explore here today, to make them aware of these opposites. And once again, we need to validate their feelings. We validate their enjoyment while also discussing the downsides of their drinking. This is part of selective thinking. In a way, we all do selective thinking. Like, I just think back at the good old days when I was in the army, but I forget the hell I've been through. That is selective thinking, but in the same way when it comes to substance abuse, we also have this kind of selective thinking, and we only focus on the nice part of it and the fun part of it. Be aware of reaction formation. Look here. There's the alcoholic in the middle. All the different kinds of defense mechanisms surrounding them. And what you see here in this diagram is the more the person is using these defense mechanisms, they are like building blocks. They're building a wall of resistance around themselves. And when they build this wall, they become isolated. And once they're isolated, you can't penetrate it. You can't get through. They're inapproachable. And by looking at this diagram carefully, you become aware of how the alcoholic or the drug substance abuser is busy isolating themselves into their little world. They become disconnected. My understanding of the definition of addiction is one word, namely disconnection. Being disconnected from yourself, from your loved ones, from your colleagues, from God, from everywhere. Your life becomes fragmented. And part of the treatment is to become whole. Wholeness is when all the fragmented parts needs to be reunited. It needs to be merged. And that's what we do in treatment when we want to help a person to merge, to bring all the loose ends together. And as we say in common English, connecting the dots. How amazing it is when we sit in therapy and we can help the person to become aware of all of these various defense mechanisms. And later on they can even smile with a smirk and say, yeah, this is how I used to deny, rationalize, regress, splitting. I've done that. I know I've manipulated, I've conned. And we know that person with an addiction problem, they are very clever. And what you've learned today is to become aware of all of these various conning tactics that they are using. And when you become aware of it, can you imagine what powerful role you can play in the preparation of getting the person towards help. In our next episode, I would like to focus also on relapse prevention, because many times what we see is that we've been helping people so beautifully, they've been recovering, but then they keep on relapsing. That is something I would like to discuss in detail next time, along with the whole aspect of the psychological roots of addiction, that we must also understand it in the context then of relapse prevention.